All right, I'll call this meeting to order. Jake will note the roll. Jake, are there any appearances?
Yes, Rick Bernstein is here to appear, and he did bring some handouts. I will pass those down for those.
All right. All right. Rick, if you want to come to the table so those on the recording can see.
Oh, there. So Jake will keep me honest. I won't go over 3 minutes. That's why I put some things in writing. My name is Rick Bernstein. I lived in Monona for 10 years. I've worked as a historic preservation professional for over 30. I'm retired now, so I have time to come to meetings like this. I just want people to start thinking about the Frank Alice House as an asset and not a liability. I think there's a lot of potential the house has. And I tried to list some of those assets here and some of the thinking that I'd like to see applied as part of the master plan. It's a great place to hold fundraisers. I think the beer sales are kind of proving that. And it'd be a great place for nonprofits to have a room or office. That's one way. If you were to lease the building to a series of private nonprofits whose mission fits in with the programmatic goals of the park, be it environmental, cultural, natural, recreational, that could all go towards keep defraying the operating costs of whatever the house might be, whatever it might cost to keep it up. In terms of having a long-term lease, I think that's possible. I currently work with the Dane County Historical Society, and we have a lease at the Lusher Family Heritage Center for 30 years. So that's a Dane County park. And if it's in the Dane County Park, it should be something that might work with the covenant that you now have on the property. One potential leasee could be Clean Lakes Alliance. I think those goals fit very neatly with the property here. And I've kind of highlighted an example of what Clean Lakes Alliance is doing with the executive residence in Maple Bluff. They're working with them to restore the shoreline and do a lot of native planting, and they're going to have a volunteer work party there in the near future that I've signed up for and other people are eligible for. So I think hopefully those are the kind of things that can be applied and thought about as part of the master planning process. And hopefully you can find a place for the Frank Alice House as part of the master plan. I do think it's important to compare doing something with the Frank Alice House against other alternatives, sort of like an EIS, where you have various alternatives and you compare those, and then from those alternatives, you select the one that's best and really fits the project goals. And I do think the environmental, cultural, historical, recreational goals are something that the Friends of San Damiano has mentioned on their website, and I think could be part of the master plan's goals. So I think there again, the Frank Alice House could fit within that. I need to go over my 3 minutes, but thank you for listening.
Thanks, Rick. All right. New business. I will pass this along to. Oh,
Can we do minutes?
yeah, I'll wait till Kyla gets. Oh, yeah, sorry. Approval of meeting minutes of July 19th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in any additions, corrections, changes? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right. New business. And this is when we'll discuss the public input on survey questions and also the focus group categories. And I'll pass this along to Dan to facilitate.
Thank you, Andy. Survey draft. Just send that to Brenda too. So Nancy had shared some potential questions with Jake, and then he sent those along to us, and then we added a few things, kind of tweaked it a little bit. And then Brenda and Alexis also added a couple things about the house. So if we want to go over the survey, let me real quick send this to Brenda so she
Is
has.
that page 10 of the
Yeah.
everything we got? Okay.
Yeah. At the beginning, I think Brenda made this comment, we should probably have a statement underneath the title, potential questions for Damiano Community Survey. So if we can come up with something, put under there, kind of get people in the mood, take a survey. They go right to the questions. So Jake, is this something you want us to put in Survey Monkey, or will you put it in the?
We can house it from our city account survey, I think, and then what I was thinking is we'll come up with it in like one draft, email it out to the committee so you can try it out, make sure everything works, and then we'll duplicate that one for the live one that goes out to the general public. Because we do pay, we have an account that we pay to get so many responses or whatever.
So to start it out with, a lot of these questions, and Nancy's well aware of this, it's kind of typical in surveys that you ask people these questions. So usually you start off with your age range, and this is, we started out at 18 to 29. We did have younger people for Violet. Do we want to go younger? I forget, they were like 10 years old or
I
something.
mean, the age ranges that I put there were virtually the same ones that you started with in the quick survey. I mean, and the objection to going in, I don't know what other people feel about it. Have you done the surveys?
Yeah,
where
with
you go younger?
Violet, one of our outreaches with Violet was with elementary schools.
Right,
So they were given direction to the survey. And it was something that we asked parents help them with,
okay.
so that they weren't going in on their own. But I forget, I think we started at 8 or 10, somewhere there.
No, we were engaging like 3rd through 5th graders for tours of the property with the one city schools, those school districts. So that would put you at 8 probably.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So maybe just add one more and
8
then
to
say,
17.
yeah.
When are you doing those?
School year, so that'll be part of the focus groups.
Okay.
Oh, that will start in September.
Correct.
Next is please indicate your race. So and see the items there. Are we good there? Are we missing anyone?
I didn't bring a copy of the survey. I was looking over Brenda's.
Actually, I don't have that.
I'll email it to her. She doesn't have it yet.
I have the copy.
It's mine.
I can go for another.
I know the copy of it marked up because I.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I had the marked up copy. I mean, I looked at them, so I just didn't have a chance to print it off. I'm just a little crazed. Hang on, I got it. Oh,
Send it to her. Okay. I think we're pretty good, and it's interesting because people are multiracial, and we've never asked that question before, but I think it's good to ask. I think Ray made a comment on the indicate your ethnicity, and so she was wondering if that was redundant.
I think it is. I do too.
I don't understand why it's separate.
It's on separate on every survey you see, but I'm not exactly sure why.
Yeah.
So would you include that as an option under race, white, Latino, white, non-Latino, or just leave it out altogether?
Oh, we don't have Latino and
Well, you
race. So we
you
should
have
add
two
it.
or more races on here, so.
Yeah, but Latino is not two races necessarily,
Yeah, I think I would
No.
wanna,
But,
not a race.
yeah, that's fine. Sure. Okay, say that.
I think you could always put Hispanic or Latino and then have other.
Is that even the correct terminology anymore?
Well, Latino X is the group in Madison, so they use Latino. I haven't heard Hispanic in a while.
I haven't heard that, I've heard they don't use that anymore. I've also heard of it's Latinx, not Latino X.
Latinx.
That's what I've heard. but I
And
don't
actually,
know
what I've heard
for
is
sure.
Latinx is
Latin.
a white created thing and then they have.
I think so too. That's why I'm asking what the
Yeah.
correct terminology would be.
Because
I know that that's a big deal.
yeah. Well, yeah, correct thing to put there,
So you look into that.
yeah. The income. atypical.
Typical, and I guess I want to ask on that one. So as somebody who does a lot of surveys for my work, my consulting work. You know, one of the rules of thumb of the survey is like, don't ask anything that's like not actionable, that's not gonna tell you something, right? And so I'm not objecting to that question, and I know it's frequent, but I'm wondering what it is that we're gonna get out of that question.
I agree. I agree with that. I couldn't figure out what that had to do with.
Well, I mean, it has as much to do with it as race, doesn't it? I mean, it's sort of economic class, essentially. It's what-
One reason that Madison used it, well, and other parks that we work with is it also helps what goes in the park and the reasons why. That's a lot of parks, you'll see things that people can readily use, like grills, picnic shelters, picnic tables, those things. And it kind of gears it towards people that it serves their purposes more so. Gives you I think it gives you an idea of some of the things that you are to a certain level.
And it might give you some idea of how well the survey respondents reflect to the community, as well as the racial information also.
Fair question. I think if you look at the census website, the correct rate of approach that's on there. Yeah, I think it's actually kind of similar to what you've got in there.
And they're two separate questions, yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I looked at.
Oh, on the ethnicity.
Yeah.
And then does it have it listed as Hispanic?
Yeah. I guess, yeah, but I think it's a good resource to just get ready.
If anyone would ever question, that's the reason why, because we looked at the census, so.
You got it.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the income?
I'd leave it in.
Leave it in.
Okay. I don't have an opinion either way.
Andy's being quiet.
It doesn't feel good.
Oh.
No, I think it's fine.
I think I lean towards what you're saying about it gives you an idea of what it means.
Yeah,
So
there's, They're just such different needs for different groups.
And you can obviously slice the data a million different ways.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you can, I mean, there's a million different subsets that might tell you. Might be helpful too in terms of, yeah, so it's fine.
So the next question I thought was interesting because we usually just ask where you live, basically, but I kind of like what you did here because you're opening it up to people that actually work in in business and stuff, so.
Shouldn't this question though be, please, I mean, because some of these, somebody could be a resident of Monona and a business owner in Monona or Madison or whatever. So instead of the one statement, a statement or statements that describes,
Yeah, maybe a separate.
and not where you live,
More
describes
than
your situation.
I also have where you live.
Take out the word
Level
one.
Yeah.
Take out the word one.
Yep,
Please.
select the statements that describe.
Yeah, and add an S after. statement.
Maybe also instead of resident of Dane County, that could just be like resident outside of, I mean. You have Monona and Madison, those are obviously Dane County, so maybe just other or something like that.
Because
You know, other resident of Dane County, you mean, so that somebody doesn't think they should mark Monona and Dane County resident.
Right,
Etc.
right.
we've actually in surveys all over Wisconsin had people from all over the country.
Yeah.
Because, you know, people move from Monona but they still see the news and read about things and they're interested in.
Yeah.
So we could either leave residents of Dane County in and add other, or just have other.
Guess I would ask why we care if they're a business owner. Have property taxes versus an employee that works. So lives outside of the county.
I've never seen that in the question, but I like it.
I think the
Understand.
schools have used that.
Might be a separate, or you could say that's a separate question, like, do you own a business in Monona? That's what we're trying on. I also wonder if, do we want to differentiate, because it's so close to Madison, Monona border? Do we want to identify people who live in a certain radius of the park that could be Monona or Madison? That's what I've been, I mean, the beer gardens, it's sort of like, you're in all those neighborhoods. And is that an important differentiation? Someone who's
Like. by zip
within
code.
2 miles versus.
Yeah. We've done before, we've done it through zip codes where we've asked for people's zip codes.
I think that would be better.
Yeah, because then that's when we knew that people from Arizona were taking tests.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would,
Yeah.
that would solve the whole issue.
Yeah, I thought about zip codes and I also thought about doing like east side Madison, you know, west side Madison, you know, north or south, but then I just
Zip
got to
codes
be
good.
like,
Zip
to
codes are
like,
great.
how do you do, you know, how do you define that? Because. And the zip code thing is a little bit dicey in that, you know, if we get a lot of 53716, we don't know if it's Monona or Madison.
Oh, it's the same zip code, because
Sure, the chunk. 53716. That's all.
Right, exactly.
Or
So,
half and half, I think.
or you can add in there just a couple of neighborhoods adjacent. So have, are you a resident of Madison? Are you a resident of Lakeside? Are you a resident of 2 or 3? Or so have that just be category. Because for Vilas, we did, are you a resident of the Vilas neighborhood, the Dungeon Monroe neighborhood? So we knew where people at around the park who was taking the survey.
No, there's a whole Sassy neighborhood over there, but that's a pretty big chunk.
We definitely need to know who's Monona.
Yeah.
The zip codes doesn't address that, and we want to understand who's paying taxes.
Yeah.
So Dan,
Mhm.
if you break it into 2, are you trying to keep it at a minimum number of questions?
Well, it's getting to be a pretty big survey. but I think that's okay.
If
Because
you break-
it's gonna be open a month, so
If
it's,
you break it into two, you can ask, where do you live? And then separately ask, do you own a business? Do we want to know people work here? Or is that of interest? Because if they work here, they aren't necessarily paying taxes here.
Well, that's why I
No,
put
I think business
owner.
owner is,
Yeah,
So then it would be one question about where you live and one question about if you're a business owner. And that way, it's just a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we're trying to how we're gonna extrapolate the data and
Yeah,
filter
makes
it.
it
So if we're
easier.
filtering it by residents of Monona and business owners of Monona as one category of survey responses, and then quite frankly, everyone else,
Yeah.
you know, can be lumped together. I don't think it,
yeah, or Madison, because as I said in my comment, the reason why I was suggesting separating Madison from Monona and not lumping Madison with all the rest of Dane County is there are some foundations that are really focused just on Madison. And so to be able to say that we reached out
Yeah.
to Madison specifically and not just Dane County, or not just Monona is important.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
So Monona, Madison, other Dane County
Yeah.
residency. New question. Business owner.
and I'll put city in front of Monona and Madison.
Right.
And then we could put in parentheses or something after Dane County outside of the city.
Yeah, that could be another
Yeah.
category.
outside.
Well, if they check both, you know that they're in Madison and Monona, right?
But yeah, they can only check one, so. Then we can.
what if you did Monona, Madison, other fill in the blank?
They're trying to get at Dane County too. Right?
We've got resident, city of Madison, residents, then city of
Yeah,
Monona,
Dane County taxpayers for.
Yeah.
and then other, then we can have other after those three.
City of Monona, city of Madison, and then residents, some other municipality in Dane County.
Or outline Dane County, is that?
So they're just other resident of Dane County.
Yeah, yeah.
Presumably they know.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
The resident of Dane County.
And you may still need another catch-all.
Yeah,
because
other
there's some-
outside of Dane County.
So
Well, I had that, I knew.
And I have to say, the next one, the number of individuals, including yourself, residing in your household was another one where I kind of got caught a little bit, because I was thinking, okay, what are we gonna, again, what's actionable in that? What is that, you know, but if we can say we got surveys from 3,000 people, or 3,000 surveys, but, you know, representing 7,000,
Yeah.
you know, I think that's important, so that's why I left it.
I think so, because you, going into this, you wanted to reach 5,000 people.
Right,
I think it would be helpful to know if there's children in the household. I don't know how exactly you'd word it, but
so you don't want to double count, you have two-
Yeah.
one household.
So our typical surveys, we have that, how many individuals, including yourself, reside in your household, those answers, and then we do ask, are there individuals in your household that are under the age of 18 and over the age of 65? And so,
Just have a yes, no question.
and then that is, yeah, none, 1, 2, 3 plus of each category is the answer. So then that can give us a better understanding of, is there 6 people, and are you having grandma and grandpa live with you, and number of is on the age 8.
So if more than one person from the household fills this out, and we're double counting the household.
I'm just saying the math that Nancy was thinking through
Yeah.
doesn't work. It's not scientific,
right.
but it will be accurate to say we receive number of responses. representing these categories, households, individuals. I would do it the way we've done
Yeah,
it, someone thought about it. Right. I assume.
so it's under 18 and over 65.
Did you get that, Dan? How'd you start that?
So we're,
Are there?
Individuals in your household that are like under the age of 18 is one category, over the age of 65, and each of those, it's either none, 1, 2, 3 plus.
65 or over
Over
65.
age 65.
Under 18,
65, it's 64.
65.
let's go. All right, please check the following statement which best reflects your familiarity with San Damiano property to date. And this one would be open to all, or you can check all.
Mhm.
Is there anything that you want to add?
Well, I obviously had a few other things in there that got deleted, but I'm, totally open. I mean, my draft, I think I had, voted by and drove by, because I honestly, for the first 2 years of this project, I would say the vast majority of people that I've spoken to, when I say, have you ever been to San Damiano, respond with, oh yeah, I know where it is, I drive by it all the time.
Yeah,
But that doesn't mean, and that's hugely different than being on the property, or actually hugely different, as we all know that have been on it, And there's lots of boats that hang out in front too.
Yeah.
So they view the property from the water, but they don't go on.
so we want to add, we can combine that, say drove by or boated by.
Drove slash. What does it matter if they've driven or boated by? They haven't been on the grounds.
That's a good question.
I mean,
I drive by it, I just drove by it on my way home, so like, what does that
be other?
what is that answering?
Could be not familiar with the property.
Right.
Could be probably an option then instead of
Yeah.
other.
But they consider themselves familiar with the property, that's why I wrote it that way, if they drove by. I guess the reason for the question is that we had a lot of discussion about people's opinions related to their familiarity, like at the last meeting, we were talking about surveying and, there's people that know it, and there's people that don't, and kind of if people don't really know the property, are their opinions as valid if they haven't been on the property as the ones who have? And so that's why I felt, and also because I think it's instructive to us to know sort of where people are plugging in today, how people are plugging in today. I think will tell us a lot in terms of future outreach.
I would say specifically with the vote aspect of this, what this question gets at that the next one doesn't is those who have yet to visit the property have only seen it from the water. The next question asks, if you visited the property, how did you get there? Which I think is a solid question, or well, actually, it's in Nancy's one. I don't know if it's in this other one. But anyways, I think what I like about adding the boating is that's how they're perceiving the property. And that's the only way they're perceiving it at this point.
So we're asking questions about water access and who is interested in water access. Is it those who own boats or is it those who
Don't have.
don't own boats?
Right, that's a good point, yeah. So I like the idea of adding voting in separately, and I mean,
So you-
maybe the drive-by doesn't matter.
How
So you
about
want
view
to
from boat or car? Is that covered?
doesn't get at what I'm saying.
Yeah, we need to know.
Which
You
is-
want to know the vote part of it.
Right.
Okay.
But don't these two questions go hand in hand, like, are you familiar, and then how are you familiar, basically?
No, the second one's just how did you get there?
Yeah, I don't think they're the same question.
So are we repeating what we're asking in the second question by adding?
I don't think so, because the first question is, are you familiar with it? And the people who, for years and years and years, have sat out there for hours over weekends, feel like they're familiar with property, but they may never have stuff about it. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, there's other ways to be familiar. There's following the news, there's, so this is people's own perception of their familiarity.
Yeah, last week before the beer garden, we were out doing the trees, and the two women came up to me. I was by the house, and they came up to me and asked me about what was going on, because Jake was setting up all the tables for the beer garden.
Okay.
And they were like, are they doing construction on the house? And I said, no, it's beer garden tonight, come to the beer garden. And they both said, and they were probably in their 50s. They both said, we're lifelong residents of Monona. We've never been on this property before. It's the first time I've ever been on it.
That's the vast majority of our community. I mean, that's what we were talking about when I saw you at the beer garden, right? And I was, we talk about it all the time. This doesn't have a, oh, actually, it was when we were, when Andy and I had a tour last week. There's just doesn't have a natural constituency because it's been a private piece of property.
And people feel like they're familiar because they've driven by it
Right.
twice a day for 20
Right.
years. And I think that's a sense of ownership, or sense of,
And everyone, well, I wouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people were afraid to come on the land.
Right.
And when I talked to them, I said, I've lived here 30 years and I was always afraid to step across that sidewalk. And they
Well,
said,
it was
"We were
frowned
too."
on. You got in trouble if you did
Yeah,
it. They
right.
came out and scolded you.
Yeah, and so that's what they said. They were like, oh yeah, we were always afraid to come over here. So there probably is still a large amount of people out there, constituents, that
Right.
are afraid to come on the property because they
Right.
don't know that it's park.
Right, which is why Jay put the signs out
Mhm.
on the
Yeah.
driveway, because people ask still all the time, can I go?
That's a
Right.
good sign.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that.
Come on in.
I would be close.
What do you
That's
think?
my
Yeah.
thought. I don't think it hurts.
So I had, what word is, I forget what you had on it before. Oh. Is it my vote?
So the words I used are not as tidy as yours, but one of them is visited nearby in a boat. I'm like trying to capture
Right, yeah.
that you were there, not just boating by, and then viewed from car driving nearby.
Yeah, I had driven by it and paddled or floated by it in watercraft. I figured that would include, there's certainly tons of kayakers and paddle boarders.
Right.
As well as power boaters that go by it all the time, so, that,
There's never been any signage on the lake, though, of what that property was.
But everybody knows, like the
everybody on the
boat
lake that I
people,
think is up there,
yeah.
no. Boat people have known for years.
We call it Jesus Beach, I've heard. It's also Jesus Beach or Holy Bay. That's what it's known by.
Yeah.
All right. How did you get there?
Can we combine Uber, Lyft, taxi as like a ride service or something like that? Because they're kind of all the same thing.
Taxi / ride share.
What about scooter or horse, large dog?
Do we want on the, I just, if on I visited the property, how did you get there? Do we want to put, check all that apply? Is that a check all that apply?
I mean, for people who've come more than once, kind of. Sure.
Yeah.
Say foot.
There's a lot of travelers that go through there.
Be interesting to ask people that came by car, where did you park?
You know what? When we're training people,
Anywhere. On beer garden.
if you went
nights,
to
so we
beer
never park.
gardens, you would see, like, people, I mean, really starting with snow snakes, because we use the high school, it's like, so many people came through on Thursday night. And when they came through, they were like, don't worry, I'm just dropping somebody off, I'm gonna go park over at the high school. Oh, don't worry, I'm just dropping somebody off, I'm going to Cremar, I'm going to Restore, because that's the beauty about nighttime things. All those lots are available,
Yeah.
because the establishments are close.
So did you have a shuttle service?
And we had tons of bikes, tons of bikes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah, those
I
lots.
took
So
a
did you do the
bus.
bus?
We went down Winnequa and we got down to the other park and it was parked on the side that you can park on and people were coming down the street with chairs way down the street.
Mhm.
So we went over to resell, parked in there. parked in
Yeah.
there. When we were there last week, we had lunch out on the back of the house and that two-story party boat was anchored outside.
Oh, the pontoon porch?
Uh-huh. And they were,
That's awesome.
they were having like an office party or something because they were all in the water. I don't know if that's a category.
That's boating, honey.
I guess that's
on there.
boating,
Yeah.
but it's kind of a weird boat. You know?
The pedal boat, pedal pub from Breakwater and
Mhm.
MSCR MSCR pontoon.
Yeah.
They still have the Betty Lou cruise.
Not on Lake Monona.
Yeah, they don't have it on that.
Nope. Just Mendota.
I don't think that boat could get as close as the pontoon boats can.
Yeah, no.
What values or guiding principles do you feel should best describe the San Damiano property and its future? Check up to 6. You can read through there. We added a couple of things in here.
Yeah.
One of the things that Brenda added, she separated social and spiritual. So we looked at it and kind of historically. So those 3 questions are, you know, in indigenous history would be first, and social history would be the Alice House, and then the attorney and mayor afterwards. And then spiritual would be then its most recent history. Do you think? Got a good selection there.
I think so.
Now this next question is interesting because typically when we do park surveys, we don't do these, but I like these questions where you have the high, medium, and low. Number of activities and facilities, ideas have already been generated by the community for the property, which we'd like to know how important each of these are to you. So,
And I didn't know if important, I mean, this was really done quickly, so you guys, so I just, you know, I didn't know whether how interesting or how important, I didn't know, you know. But the idea, and I agree, that there's some tightening up that could be done. You know, just ask about a garden as opposed to a specific kind of garden. Or, although I think community garden versus something else might be important, but, or a year-round cafe versus a seasonal concession or something. So you can tighten it up, but
yeah, the thing that the Violet's neighborhood did this on their own. Violet's. They asked the question this way. Typically, when we ask the question, we are, do you want this? And then we list a bunch of things. And then people pick what they want. But what makes this an interesting way to ask the question, then you start to see those values better. And I think it's a better way to ask the question on what you want to see in the park.
I had a question, Nancy, about you referred to a revival of a water taxi. Has there ever been one?
Way back in like
Yeah.
the 1930s.
Yeah.
Okay.
there's a picture of it over at Off Broadway Draft House. And there used to be a water taxi that ran from the Tony Watha Springs Hotel, I believe, was one stop, right? There were several stops, but it was Tony Walker Springs and it went across to Isthmus.
Has
So
somebody
not in the
mentioned
memory
that?
of living. Nancy, but
They used to have,
nobody alive.
no, they used to have a big boathouse in James Madison Park, big pier.
Okay,
the
yeah,
taxi
no,
came on that
yeah,
side.
I guess I didn't know that was, I didn't think of it as a taxi, but yeah, I knew there were a lot of shuttles to the hotel, Tonawanda.
And there's been a lot of
Taxi.
talk with I've been part of the Madison Design Professionals on the Lake Monona waterfront Madison. And there was talk 10 years ago about bringing back the water taxi on the lakes. And there was a lot of support for it.
Safe to say there's some talk now. Yeah.
I would
Might
take it.
even, might even happen before,
Yeah.
might even
I don't
happen
want to
before
drive.
San Damiano.
Well, and when that project gets legs, it's another huge waterfront park and then people are gonna wanna go.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, there's the notion too, is not just even necessarily, you know, when you think of a water taxi, some people I'm sure would probably just think of it as like pedestrians hopping on board and going across the isthmus, but. And I can tell you the water taxis in Chicago, I know it's a totally different scene, but to get around downtown, they're indispensable. Like, if you're a business person downtown, you definitely take a water taxi to get around town. And, but, you know, there's talk about the possibility of that water taxi not only including pedestrians, but also being big enough that you could put bikes on it. So so it could have a stop like at San Damiano, and then it could go down to the, you know, where the bike path, you know, is, so people who are biking could get, you know, on the bike path there and then go over the isthmus and then, you know, do a circuit. Yeah, so that's what it is. Whether or not we say revival, maybe we just say water taxi, but there's a fair number of people I think that know about it.
okay. That's fine.
It definitely is, whatever it comes on the water, a pier, a dock, at the site, it's important to know what it's going to house.
Right.
You know, if it's gonna have taxis on it and whatever, it might need to be pretty good size.
You can maybe organize these things under buckets. It seems like there's water access. List of water access, there's a list of permit, like facilities, there's a list of, it might be a way to help the survey taker.
So they
orient
don't,
their mind.
not to just big list,
I agree.
yeah.
It just seems
I think you can
very,
get it
this
a
is,
little
this
more
is
general.
a lot to look
Probably
at.
get it down to 10, 12.
Dumb question, but there's really nothing about the house thing to go with.
I was gonna mention that.
Well, the last time we talked about that being if we understood the functions and the goals, then you can assess whether the house can support that or not.
I think that the house is important to a lot of people though, and it is a landmark, so I think we need to
Yeah.
have something regarding it.
Yeah.
There are some things here that.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
see some of them, but it's not specifically saying related to this.
So what's the question we
Yeah,
wanna,
what would
what do
the
we wanna
question
learn
be?
about?
You're
Right.
saying, you know, what features, elements belong to the property's history, so.
I don't view that as related to the house necessarily.
No, I'm not, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, we're talking about the property's history, but we're not talking about the house history.
But if we lump it, or we put them in buckets, you know, there's like culinary, hospitality training, history, historic museum, multi-purpose space. We can add something in there or put like a title over that, say potential house uses or something.
I
Or
think
structure.
if we're gonna ask about the house, we need,
Separate.
if we're gonna ask, it has to be separate. Yeah, because a lot of these things could apply, I mean, certainly I'm saying a lot of these
Yeah.
things could apply to any.
So, so the way I read this was a lot about programming. And I think this phase in the master plan is appropriate to talk about programming. My hesitation with asking about specific use of any individual element on the site including the house right now, is that we haven't provided people the basis of decision-making. And so even though you might not put your name on this, if someone has said, I want the house to go, or I want the house to stay, and then later they learn other things, they may be reluctant to change their opinion because they already said that.
Oh, sure.
So we're gonna do another public input survey after public input number one, is that what we're thinking? Because I thought this was like the one big one that we would generate public input, meeting, conversation, concept plans, and move forward from there. So if this is the one that we're trying to get to 5,000, I would recommend we do have a question about the house and whether you support preservation of the house from a historical acknowledgement or recognition, or you support the preservation of the house for repurposed uses for program ideas. Or three, I don't
I
support.
just think that's really. I mean, if, let's just assume that guesstimated, 40% of the people have never even been in the house, or 40% or more have never been in the house and barely been on the property. For them to say, I want to save it, I don't want to save it, is based on, with that limited familiarity and with no price tag and with no anything, it just seems like that's not really valuable data.
I think it is a valued asset because it is a landmark of Monona, and I think we need to recognize that. I think it's important to a lot of people in Monona.
Sure.
And we're talking about appreciation of the property's social, spiritual, farming history, but we're not talking about the actual structure that's on that property that is landmarked.
Right.
I mean, you could ask something along the lines of, how, is the house as part of the property important to you, not important, use the same scale, but you can separate, as a separate question.
Yeah, you're still giving it whatever level it is to you.
Right.
It sounds like it should be a separate question just about that.
And then
And then these
My
programs.
assumption is we're not having a second survey go out
Yeah.
to reach 5,000. That's gonna have questions about the house and whether it's preserved or not.
Yeah.
So I think if this is our one shot, certainly it's the item of discussion that comes up the most.
Because all these are, like Brenda said, these are program questions. So then when we go into concept, it will be programming. And then that's a question in the concepts of, do you like this or not? Not necessarily the structure. The structure is a part of that discussion.
Yeah, I think the thing that's a little tricky for me about, do you want to preserve the house, yes or no, right now? Questions for what? And what will it cost? There's all these other questions that, to me, have to be part of that discussion. And so it's, if we, let's say 90% of the survey applicants say tear it down right now, not knowing the answer to these questions, what's our, how do we use this data?
I don't think it should be a question of whether or not we should preserve the house. I just think that there should be something that says,
Is the house,
look,
is
I
the house
have an
important to
appreciation
you?
for the
Yeah.
property such and such,
Okay,
but do I have an appreciation for the landmark on the
Yeah,
property?
That's part of your appreciation for the
I
overall.
don't think we needed to program it or, do we want it or not? I just think that it needs to be addressed.
So it's using that same, is it important to address the future use of the historic house? on the
Maybe not put
property?
use, because then you're
The
saying,
future of the historic building on the property. I mean, what you're after is high, medium, or low importance, or don't have.
I would say, sort of in the context of your overall appreciation of the site, how important is the house? High, medium, or low?
Or you could just change the historic museum as an option to historic house. And then it's in the context of everything else.
but then you're saying you want to preserve it.
Yeah, I kind of like the historic museum question or option, just to
Yeah.
see what people,
Okay,
I like the way you phrased it too.
Say it
So in the
again.
context,
say it again.
in the context of your overall appreciation of the site, how important is the house?
and then it's high, medium, low, or don't know.
Yeah,
Does that work? I'm just looking at my my fundraising colleagues here. I mean, is that,
I think that works.
you think it works?
I think it's fine.
Should we say a landmark house or just historic house?
I think historic.
You're
houses
okay.
probably.
Does it have to be landmark or historic? House?
Just
'Cause
the
then-
Frank Ellis house.
Because then once you start to say historic or landmark.
right.
Yeah,
Kind of
Frank
get in
Ellis
it.
house. I
Just
like
the
that
Frank
better.
Ellis house.
Kind of
Yeah,
put
all
that
by
one,
name.
Put it on the-
yeah,
It's a heavy term.
right.
Yeah,
I think that works. If you put Frank Ellis house, high, medium, low.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Then, you know, there'd probably be a number of people that feel low importance, but if it can be supporting the functions that are important and it's feasible, then
Right,
that'll work. That makes sense.
Or people can say, don't know, no opinion. I don't,
Right.
it depends,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, I think
right.
that's a good way.
I thought it was interesting, now, who's given tours,
It's Pat Howell and myself right now.
just you? Because at the beer garden last week,
And Jake.
I'm gonna be giving.
And Jake, sorry.
That weary hand comes out.
I was just thinking of the beer garden. I didn't mean in any way, shape or form to.
but what I'm interested in.
Or
is,
Andy, he's done,
Brenda went to go sign up and we're at the beer garden.
Yes,
But
They
if
were all sold.
oh, they were sold out. They were like, you
Yeah.
can come back in a month or two.
Yeah.
And but and then, so we watched people get in line
How much
and they
did you
were
charge for those
excited to go in
tickets?
the house.
Totally.
Now, what's the feeling like when they go inside and they go on tour and then when they leave?
The feeling is that they're really happy to see it. And there's, I think like most of us, or a lot of us, again, but I will only speak for myself. And what I feel like I'm getting from them, which is that they're, kind of love the fireplaces and the staircase. And then the rest of it, they're kind of in shock at how bad it is, what horrible shape it's in, and I try to manage expectations a little bit at the beginning, to say that I pass, I'm sure we all do, there's a black and white there on what the house looked like before, and so they can see that the outside of the house as well as the inside of the house has obviously been altered. And in the entree, I know we talk about the fact that the house has been altered as it's changed hands based on how it was used. As anyone else would do with their house, because there's quite a bit of the third floor was a ballroom and now it's chunked up dormitory rooms. I mean, so the reaction has been, I think, largely like initially when they walk in there, feels much bigger than they think. Feels bigger inside than what they expected when they're outside. And they're impressed with the fireplaces and the staircase, then otherwise are like, whoa.
Yeah, because it's good that you're taking tours because I think it'll affect the survey.
Yeah.
Because they get so excited and they look at it and they're like, oh, but then if they leave and they're really discouraged, that could tilt it the other way.
Right.
And so.
What is it,
Interesting.
I mean, Jakes, because you have done so many other tours more than I have, would you say it's pretty accurate with the tours that you've done?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is demographic based too.
Yeah.
I think there's a pretty distinct age, 65 and older have had kind of one opinion of the house and its future, and under 65, I think has been,
Yeah.
a little more, less decisive.
Yeah.
I think you know how that, so the older tend to not think it's worth putting money into,
No,
the other way around. It's
all
old, so
older is
it's old,
value
humble,
the historical
yeah,
nature and
yeah.
preservation.
Yeah.
And also some of the older people that have been in, and some that, I mean, they were part of, like my neighbors, for instance, were part of Meals on Wheels. When Meals on Wheels were offered out of there, so they will, they've been around the house for a while and, and then there's several other people that have gone, that used to use the youth center that was there. So to the extent that there was public contact, those people, I think are,
Okay.
and those are all.
Can we go back to the table? You have a line in here that says year-round cafe tied to it.
I don't know if it was my typo, or thinking of it.
So
So year-round cafe tied to its farm,
Yeah,
and then the next one just says it's.
yeah, I don't
nothing.
know, I can't recall what, maybe it was just, you could take it out for, if I can think of what it was, I'll let you know, but I don't think.
So were you saying earlier, Nancy, that maybe we could collapse the year-round cafe options into fewer options? Because
Yeah, I mean, I think you could say year-round cafe and then tied to its roots like that, and then put, for example, just cafe, coffee, tea house, wine bar. I mean, if we, we could give some examples if.
I think saying, for example, like given a category
Yeah.
of, I don't know what to call it, like restaurant / cafe, and then some examples.
Yeah, exactly.
So that it's not eliminating some great idea someone has.
Right,
but also
exactly.
is not listing them all specifically, and then you're going, oh, I'd rather it was a year-round concession stand instead of a coffee tea house.
Right.
Can you say like
Exactly.
year-round food options and then say, for example, wine bar, cafe, concession stand?
Well, I mean, I do think there's a big difference between a year-round concession stand
Versus
and
cafe.
and
You
versus a
separate that
cafe.
out.
Yeah, I would say cafe restaurant is probably, although that's why I phrased that's why I said cafe, because I'm not, I wanted to keep it small feeling,
Right, yeah.
if anything. So, and I was definitely differentiating between like a year-round cafe that could be any one of those things tied to it, or concession, I think of like ice cream, hot dogs,
If you put all the
Yeah.
food
Food and
stuff
beverage.
into one category and then look for something that says it in a really generic way. Might not even have to be a cafe. Opportunities to purchase and. See
But I think we're trying to gauge sort of if there's a food and beverage section to this, there's, like right now, we're doing food carts.
Right.
Then there's concessions would be sort of a more permanent level of service than wine bar cafe is getting into.
So you're looking for categories of how frequent and,
Nature of
yeah,
what the experience would be.
but
Because
so that's what
there-
you want to test for then. if that's
Yeah,
what
because
you're
there's a big difference. You could have a concession out there and not have to have parking for it.
Mhm.
But if you have a wine bar out there, you're gonna have to have parking for it.
Or maybe the opposite.
Probably don't park in one bar.
Sorry.
But you shouldn't, maybe.
Okay, cafe.
So, but I think this is an important distinction. It's not actually about the type of use for food. It's about how permanent is it and how available is it? Like, is
Right,
it just
exactly.
happening on occasion?
Right.
Is it
Exactly.
happening all the time at a really small scale, or is it
Exactly.
happening all the time at a little bit bigger scale? So those are the categories, and then you can put, for instance.
Right, so it's not just, do you want food and beverage or don't you? It's, exactly what you said,
Okay.
which is
So 3 categories.
whether it's a permanent thing, whether it's a sort of temp thing. And whether it's sort of year round versus seasonal.
Are you guys okay with also clumping? There's like a couple of other things like about types of like boating rentals or boating lessons or fishing pier. Like those things might be able to be also clumped and in a way that you could say, for instance, is there any distinction that needs to be made from either a fundraising standpoint or a revenue generating standpoint?
Water sports. Boating and fishing are both sports, right?
Watercraft,
Watercraft.
because that could be pontoons, pedal pontoon boats, stand-up paddle boards, canoe, kayak. boating.
So it
I
could be
think boating,
watercraft,
yeah, boating,
watercraft rentals, lessons,
yeah,
storage.
right. I think watercraft is. a little more
Access,
inclusive.
watercraft access would be one thing, right? Because that's like
Yeah.
here, would that would be.
Launching canoe kayaks, yeah.
Although, if it was watercraft access, you don't really know if somebody's saying very important, whether they're meaning like, I want a dock.
Right.
Or I want a
you know,
paddleboard.
Well, we have
Yeah.
a small craft
I
landing
actually think
launching
that
area.
these descriptions, I think, are pretty good because they're pretty differentiated. You know, public dock, very different than small craft landing launching. Rentals, totally different.
Are you gonna organize these so they're closer together like that? Like,
Yeah, that's what we're talking about for this
Yeah.
one. It's-
The watercraft rentals.
Yeah. So can I just make a comment about the features / elements which honor the property's history? That was my attempt to, get to, I mean, like, for instance, there's some people that have talked about we need to preserve the grotto. I know, I'm just saying.
that's religious.
I know, but there's nothing in it right now, so, but anyway, my point is that I wasn't just thinking about that. More importantly, what I was thinking about is we've talked about features to honor the Ho-Chunk history there, the indigenous history there, whether that's, and when I say we, I mean like,
When I say,
gazillion people have brought up, what are you gonna do to honor the Ho-Chunk history? And so, and just like at Dejo President's Hall over, they have a fire ring, or, there's, obviously all over the place, or whether it's a sign or whatever it is. So I was just trying to get at, and certainly those features or elements that honor the property's history could just as much honor the farm history or
I
the
really-
Alice history.
I actually really like the way it's worded.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
because I got
Because I
caught up on that one, so
Yeah.
I was.
No,
you
I-
could say interpretive elements or, but I think it's fine.
I think it's good.
Okay,
So, and I saw Jake like Bill's post this weekend about the corn, because he was down on site last week.
Friday,
Yeah, and he made little videos and he posted it, and he
Yeah.
said, we're gonna have a celebration in September.
Yeah.
And we're gonna do it over here, and he pointed to the grass, and it's like, that's the ceremony, that's the spaces that the Ho-Chunk use, it's spaces.
Yeah.
Just open spaces.
yes,
And I was gonna,
he's digging a 4-foot pit, actually, I spent
Oh,
spent an hour on the phone with him yesterday.
so he's
Back
gonna,
on.
that's how they're gonna do with the corn.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the agenda, but yeah, it's, and he talked to Jake on Friday, thankfully, Jake caught him while he was down, and he's coming back down on Friday.
He's got a
This Friday?
Yeah. because, you know,
Going to California,
typical, you know,
that's still changed.
you know, scrambling time, you know, between it before an event, you know, he posted on that same post, he posted, oh, we're 2-3 weeks away.
Well, yeah, he's
When I
watching,
saw that post and I was like, I immediately texted him, it was like, Bill.
he's watching the corn too, because it
Yeah.
could turn fast.
Yeah. Yeah,
True,
and
right.
exactly, so we don't have an exact date yet, because of course, when I asked him for a date, he said the corn would tell us, so, you
Yeah.
know, but
Do you
we
have
have,
enough direction on the survey?
yeah,
Sorry.
I think we're missing one category though, would be playground or play spaces, for kids, that would be included. in this.
On the list.
Yeah.
Maybe play state or something and
Playgrounds are, yeah, I mean,
Did
especially,
you use something
I mean,
for Violet?
Violet's, because they have playgrounds.
Yeah, did you use that in your survey,
Mhm.
like however you worded it?
And there they had the old woman in the shoe.
Yeah.
And so
Oh.
that was
Tell me
really,
the
and then they
rest
had
of
multiple
Well,
playgrounds,
between the
and we were trying to get rid of one playground because it's kind of creepy. It's over by the multi-use pack, so a lot of adults go over there.
I'm just wondering if there's a way you worded it there.
No, that was a more traditional where we just listed things and then you pick like the high, you ranked them, the highest to lowest.
shows up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm in a meeting.
yeah.
Oh,
but that should be added, I agree, that's something.
But you can, when you get into the concepting part, then you get, if it's an item that's desired in the park, you can start to talk about what type of play space. It could be nature play, it could be,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I would
not
think
something,
that would be,
so,
right,
you know, like a colorful play structure might want to be on the nature play side where it has balls in that.
or it could be like a low ropes,
Yeah,
little challenge.
but that
course,
can come in the
awards or something, right?
concepting phase
Yeah,
if people like to
Maybe
play.
a play space, do you think? That would be.
I think, so I looked up playscape.
I would just put playground slash
Yeah.
play space.
Play space.
I want to keep it as general
Right, yeah.
common denominator.
Anything about bathrooms?
That's per-
Given this.
I think that might be assumed.
Okay.
I don't. Put it in there, because there's, I should, the email from the mayor, Mary, she just wanted to say is to have one as like option X, do nothing at all, leave as is. Like to have that as an option, like how important would it be to still do nothing? Like, because that could be a potential option at the end of all of it, is just
Do nothing in the entire site.
correct, do absolutely nothing.
So does that include leaving the house as is and just letting it go? Or what is that? I mean, does that include taking down the house and making it just all green space or?
A lot of questions, questions.
I don't think that that's actually, sorry, but I mean, from a conservation easement standpoint, that's not possible. I mean, you have a responsibility to maintain the property at a certain level.
Well, correct, not like. let it
Um,
run.
No
like,
improvements.
like that.
I think it's-
Just no improvements.
it's more conservation.
Just leave the house and
Right, but I think the intent was whether you want improvements made to the site. You know, I think it's what you.
Like, yeah, I mean, we're looking at data
Improvements is
points
such a
where,
hard word.
Yeah.
Just because everybody, anything anyone wants is an improvement, right?
Right.
So I try to be a little more specific than that.
Nothing is an option. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I don't. I mean, that's like saying,
Well,
I'm
like
gonna
it-
take it in an ashtray.
Maybe, you know, it's, I mean, you're obviously not gonna do nothing literally, but, you know, more, something that would express a sort of minimalist approach to the property.
we need feedback from it to see where people stand.
there was multiple comments in regards to that on
Yeah.
the QR code survey that I had sent out from last meetings that go to the, you know, minimal approach to development. So I think as an option for people to select that. Because it'll come up
As
with.
opposed to allowing it when we say your turn and allowing them to say it.
Correct, like it's, because maybe then you say there's, as part of that, there's a lot of the not important to not, right, to not do minimal. To be of low importance to, if we're using those categories.
So I guess what I'm saying is if somebody's not interested in is interested in a minimal approach to the property,
Right, well,
wouldn't they do that in the your turn thing? I'd like to see, just as they did in your survey.
Yeah.
I'd like to see as little done on the as possible, so we would capture that. As opposed to having it as a category
Except,
in the program.
but all the other, I think, maybe not all, most of the other choices assume we're going to do stuff with it.
But it
Well, yeah,
does
because
start,
we have
it
said
says
that
a
we're-
number of activities and facility ideas have been generated. So it's not like saying these are the only ones, it's
Right.
just saying, do you think these are important?
Not to get too into the weeds here, like we already are, but I even have an issue with saying ideas have already been generated by the community for the property. Because, I mean, these are ideas, but I don't know. And then the whole your turn, I just feel like this is their turn, whether it's the top or the bottom. I don't know, but anyway.
So maybe a little bit of tweaking with the wording. Instead of have already been generated by the community, it could say something a little bit lighter, like,
Was informally heard. I mean, we have been
Possible
generating.
ideas for.
Yeah,
Say the following is a list of possible activities.
Right,
yeah,
Right.
and then it doesn't make it sound like
Right.
there was some meeting that I didn't get to go to.
right.
right.
Here's a list.
That's what I'm worried about, yeah.
Yeah,
The generated, could you just say suggested?
like the following is a
Yeah,
list
there's a
of.
list of
ideas.
There's a list of activities.
Here's what everyone wants.
Mhm.
I don't know.
First activity, no activities. Minimal activity.
I think if you're
Should we do that
allowing
first or
them to
put it at the
say
bottom?
We're allowing them to comment is the next part, right? So they could just say nothing in those comments. Right?
Yeah.
If they want nothing.
You're right.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah,
we
so do
put
we
it as a
need an
category
extra
if,
category for that.
But that's
would we?
gotta be the, out of, I would think on surveys, the thing that doesn't get answered the most is when you have to like actually fill in and write stuff instead of just clicking buttons. So I think by the time they get to here, they might say, I've done enough, goodbye.
And I agree with Doug. I think that would often be overlooked. And I think, we have contemplative space. And that's not a thing that's developed, right? So, I mean, I think it is worthwhile to have that idea of minimalist or minimalism maybe on the chart so that we have that stat.
So,
I like first action.
minimal change,
Minimal change to existing property?
yeah, because that's just, like there is a baseline of you kind of either have to take care of what you have or you have to do something about it.
Right.
So minimal change assumes that you are taken care of.
Right, yeah.
Or
How about just
minimalist approach.
Maintain property as is or something.
maintain property largely as is. Something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, my only concern about that is that, again, I mean, if a whole bunch of people said that, if we can't find, it won't be financially feasible.
Right,
Because if they're saying we have to maintain it exactly as it is, then we can't, then our ability to generate any kind of
Vacant.
revenue off of it
But I think if
is gonna
you,
be challenging.
I think if you
I
say
mean, we got
like,
$600 in beer,
Yeah.
in donations, but that doesn't go very far when you're taking care of that big of a piece of property,
but I think if you say something like minimal change to the existing property,
Right,
that gives you a way out to when you have a concept and you say, we have to add walks because it is providing access for everyone.
Mhm.
That's a minimal addition to the park, but it has to be added to the park.
right, right.
And so that gets it away from, oh, we're not gonna do anything.
Right,
Things will have to happen just to get it up to standards for everyone to use it as park site.
I think it's worth putting on there.
The way you worded it, something like that.
so how did you word it again?
He has no idea.
And then we'll change to the existing property, that's what.
Yeah.
Minimal change to the existing property, great, add it. And what else did the ranch say? Tell me she didn't ask about bathrooms or parking.
No,
Well, I put restrooms on the list because,
things should be on.
yeah, it's
I
not
mean,
on
it's
that
either
list.
porta potty or
Yeah,
something,
public.
right?
Porta potties.
Yeah, public restrooms. The mayor's questions regarding the survey were just the option of keeping the property as is, not changing it. Do we want to add a more specific question about the house? I think we should also ask for general comments other than the one on suggested uses, which I think is already.
Which is already,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think we've addressed all of that.
Okay.
Yeah, how much time do you guys need to get through the rest of your agenda?
So let me just say that when, for those of you that may not be, if in case anybody's not more familiar with the backside of doing SurveyMonkey, when you load something on SurveyMonkey, like if Jake's using his account, I also have an account, but Jake, assuming you're gonna use your account. You know, when you design it, you hit a button and it tells you about how long how long it's gonna take you to take it. It gives you an estimate of what the average, amount of time it'll take. And it'll also tell you if if they recommend questions be changed or whatever for whatever reason. And so, and when we take it, assuming that we're the beta testers, we should do the same thing. We should see how long it takes us as a group that knows, obviously, we don't know the survey well, but still we should see, and what we get tripped on, right? It's not just that we get stuck on the survey in terms of the page doesn't move forward, it's also like,
What doesn't feel right or
I
something.
got
right?
stuck
Yeah,
and that's important to know.
So have we tackled the last part of the survey, the open-ended questions? Because we do have some other things to get to that I think will take a little while.
So the only open-ended question to comment on things that aren't on this list.
so
Oh, and then the last, bolded ones.
if you'd like to comment on the high interest or highest importance, I probably should say, Dan. And then things that are not represented. And I think we were suggesting that the last two not be included now because people don't have the information.
I agree.
I agree. Do we really want 6 boxes? It says I'd make no more than 6 boxes.
For their ideas.
Do we really want 6? I would say
Well, they-
less.
I would say 2 or 3.
I would say that most is 3.
3,
Yeah, because otherwise it gets like between your first thing and your sixth thing, there's a big difference. And so it's not telling us that much about,
Right.
well, we won't know which one is which, So if we have a smaller number that.
And I would just recommend we get rid of the your turn and just say, please share any ideas you may have.
Yeah.
All right. We done with that last bit? Everyone feel good with the survey?
Yes.
All right.
Oh, so one thing we could do, we've started the story map. And is there a website? A park website or is it
Yeah.
just the Friends?
No, it's mymonona.com/San Damiano.
So we thought you might want to put that at the end of the survey too, so that people could
Oh,
go to the.
Perfect.
so everything's going to the city's website?
this is a city committee, isn't it?
Yeah, but I thought I'm just asking because at the last meeting, we talked about the fact that we have a bigger following and that the city's website is cumbersome. I mean, it's really complicated to navigate. I mean, it's honestly, even for those of us that are on it every day.
Does the city's website have a link to the Friends?
Yeah.
The link would be a city, a link to SurveyMonkey, that this URL from the Friends of website. And
That's fine.
City
I just
website,
raised it
yeah,
because
it's
it
just a-
came up to us meeting and I didn't know what to do.
Right. It'll be one survey, but you can have it in 1,000 locations posted.
And then just, I know this is detailed, but are we putting? Again, so are we putting the city's logo and the Friends logo at the top of the survey? And like I said, I designed the surveys and everything in the opening paragraph and whether or not there's logos on there and the color of the survey and all that, I'm just asking, are we putting both of our logos? Is that how we're, since we don't have a singular logo?
I think it makes people more likely to answer it if they see some color and the logos. Okay.
I think it was a
I
little
would
more
put both
professional.
of
Yeah.
them,
I would put
because
both of them.
individuals might have an attachment to one or the other, and they're more likely
sure.
to
Right,
respond.
and
if
we're
they
in
have an
partnerships, right?
And that's where at
But you're-
the end, I would list all the websites too, so they
Yeah.
click on
Yeah.
them.
That's
Because
what you're-
they're going
you're-
different portals to get there.
I think the preamble is
Yep.
important too.
Yep,
So-
preamble.
Probably talking about all of the dates that are upcoming and the whole
Yep,
information gathering process and all that, where this fits into the process.
All right, should we move to the next discussion action item of focus group members and group makeup?
So I have one comment under nonprofit organizations. Adds some sort of, whether it's Wisconsin Bicycle Federation or some other bicycle, nonprofit bicycle promoting.
Actually, further in your packet, you have it printed off, it's under the MSA agenda. It'll be page,
Page 8.
yeah,
You have that,
These
Tim?
aren't page numbers.
It's 1 or 2 on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
I got that.
I think I don't.
You don't have the agenda?
just have under the MSA meeting agenda, item 2.
So there's six,
Page 8 and 9 of your packet.
Page 8.
so there's 6 groups, is that what's going on?
There we go.
Okay,
Is
yeah.
that what you're saying?
Are we going- are we gonna go through these?
It's, Jake started a list. This is,
Do we all know that Rutabaga's moving out of Monona?
They're gone already.
Oh, they are?
Because we have that on.
No, no,
Okay, yeah. So there's 6 groups. Dan was about to explain kind of the 6 groups and I think the organization.
And so Jake started with groups that he was familiar with that we could add to. And then, so we had 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we added the Friends and the Ho-Chunkus standalones because it's a little bit different in that you should be on your own as far as any type of discussion that goes on. So the way this was broken down was school groups, nonprofits, businesses, and minority groups. And then Jake was asking us yesterday about neighborhoods, so that might be a group on its own. Because Monona doesn't have neighborhoods, so it might be a little bit difficult to figure out what that makeup is
Right.
for the neighborhoods. So we can talk about that.
Would you just do the city
Um,
council members since they're representing neighborhoods? Or is that not?
When I hear neighborhood, I also think like the neighboring businesses across the street and not necessarily just Monona, right?
Mhm.
And it would be the houses that are right against the property.
Yeah. So one,
Maybe you do a radius.
That's what we were talking about yesterday was, is it a radius? Does it go down to Dean Street in Monona? Does it go all the way lakeside? How far does it go?
Well, it doesn't have to be a circle, right?
Yeah.
So the discussion, I think, with the mayor and Andy and I just on the prelim was that if we're including distinct neighborhood associations from the city of Madison, should we have a neighborhood focus group made up of Monona residents? And if we do, does it want to be invitations? So like if you want to be on a more in-depth focus group and you reside in Monona and represent, outside of the survey and coming to the public input meeting, you can have, and I would encourage we could have outside of the contract, have our own focus groups with different subsets of residents. Like I'll probably invite dads of Monona for a night up and kind of go through the same spiel or whatever it may be. But I think the mayor's concern was if in this input process, we're having design focus groups, and we don't really have other than one neighborhood association and 8 immediate adjacent neighbors of the property, more opportunities for the Monona residents to participate at a deeper level.
I think the question would be, what's our goal with the neighborhood groups then, right? Are we just trying to get broad input? Are we trying to get input of those that are literally neighboring the property? So that would be my question back, would be, if we open it up to all neighborhoods of Monona, well, then we're just getting broad input, and that can happen in a variety of different ways.
So maybe I'm missing it, but I don't see Madison Neighborhood Associations on here as a focus group.
No, that's the one group that we haven't added yet. And that would be residents, neighborhoods or
So,
areas.
so when I think of educational institutions, I had on my list, obviously the school district, MG 21, which I know, just want to make sure they're included.
Yes, please.
I
already wrote it too.
I also put Aldo, you could argue where they should go, but I also put Aldo Leopold's in that group because they have the school. And I thought they could go in the school group depending on what we do with the other groups. I had MSCR, which could go in community groups, or if there was like a recreation community group thing, New Storm Window, MG Nursery School, the Alice School and La Follette, because those are the 2 Madison schools.
And then you would include Summit too, then. Summit as well then? Summit and La Follette are right next to each other.
So that's why and then
With the nonprofit group, what's trying to understand I'm gonna get the school group focus, you're gonna get very clear perspective on educational opportunities. The nonprofits, there's about 200 we could think of in the property. So what's our goal for that group?
Well, the ones that are listed are good. Clean Lakes Alliance because of the lakes, of course.
How about Four Lakes Yacht Club and the Monona Sailing Club?
Yeah, I sort of had a bucket that was more recreational oriented, which included the sailing club, included Brittany Boat Club, and included the yacht club, Rutabaga.
Our friends say that.
I think one thing we need to keep in mind, I think Dan was saying we want to keep it to like 6 people or 6 organizations. So we're adding a ton of.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah, but you gotta keep in mind, Andy, that if you, to get
I'm just
one
saying what's
focus group of 10
manageable.
people, you gotta invite a ton of people to get 10 people in the room.
That's true. Yep.
That's just the way focus groups go. It's really hard, and especially if you're expecting focus groups to get together 3 times.
Yeah.
Yep. That's true.
And then I just, I also had government civic as a group. So that was MESPA, DNR, Capital Area Regional Planning, Greater Madison Metro, Dane County, and then I completely agree that Ho-Chunk should probably be separate.
That's where it was different with Madison for the services.
Yeah.
Like Metro, Fire Department, Police Department, that was all handled under city. We met with city officials.
Okay.
In the park district, so we could add that as a group. That would be like people that are on that side of the equation. Because Metro there was no bus service to Violet's Park. Everybody shocked. There was no buses that go to Violet's Park. And but it was crucial that Metro was a part of that discussion. And then the fire and the police chief were helpful because they police the park. And who's going to police the park when it's just Jake?
Apparently, with the number of late night text messages and emails I get from residents, I'm supposed to.
Get a badge. So
Yeah, stop.
So are you saying, Dan, are you saying that you want to interview services, or you want to do a separate group that's all the city service? You want to do a separate
But
group
that's not
that's all the
this-
city service?
Not the 6 focus groups you're talking about right now. That's
it's a separate group.
Separate.
Because I think it's important to talk to the services.
Okay,
So if you're trying to have 6 groups, I think the list I had started out with 6, but it has grown.
It is group.
Is there somebody that's charging us back to the money? Is it more groups we have, it's gonna cost us more?
Oh,
Is it
yeah.
all?
It's gonna cost you.
Well, I just want to sure believe if that's an issue.
Well, what's the potential issue and the number of people is going into this, we're trying to work in time constraints, like
Yes.
hour, and people don't like to sit around more than an hour and talk about things. And so we want to try and, except for you guys. So we want to try and limit all these touches to an hour and a half. That's all the attention that we're going to get out of the groups probably.
But it's 3 times, right?
3 times. But if these groups, all of a sudden, we've got 20 people showing up, it's going to be hard to do anything in an hour. Because there's just so many, it'll be so many people. And that's what I was getting at, that what Andy's saying. We're trying to limit the groups that they're not too unwieldy.
Well, there's some like no-brainers here you have to have. So Friends of San Damiano, that's one. We've said Ho-Chunk Nation, that's one. Schools seems like you gotta have that, right? So minority groups seems super important. So that's 4. If you add in business groups and one other.
I think my question on the businesses and the nonprofits is, what's the criteria? And what, are they nonprofits that are within, potential partners that are
Yeah.
within a certain distance? Or, what's the criteria for businesses?
Yeah, the nonprofits were good because they gave ideas, outside solutions, like Clean Lakes Alliance, for example. They talked about the health of lakes and lagoons and things. The businesses, to be honest, were the most difficult group at Violet's because we had St. Mary's, we had Edgewood. Well, no, Edgewood was under schools, but the guy at St. Mary's didn't want to talk. He showed up, he didn't want to talk, and he finally didn't come anymore. And then we had Winger Boats, which is a business. They want to rent their boats out of Violet's, and then it got to be an argument with the city because the city's like, it's a public park. And we don't want you running your business out of our public park because you've got your own thing over here. So the business is going to be the toughest group.
I would say take personally, I would say take the businesses out. And to answer your question, Wes, I think in terms of other nonprofits that are here, like the Bloom and Groves Historical Society, I had Oberk in my list because I could easily see some collaborative things. In addition to Wisconsin Historical Society and Clean Lakes. And I'm sure there, but there are some, but I think of them as potential stakeholders. I mean, Elder Leopold could be that in that group too, but there, I see them as stakeholders because of the history of the property and their proximity to the property. In a way that both, you know.
I want to go back to the idea of there's all these groups that deal with voting or water access, and as we're evaluating ideas, how do we, it could be a really useful group to make sure we're not duplicating efforts or something that's complementary or some, you know, that could be.
I think those all fall in nonprofit. There's not any.
Well, the sailing club, I had the sailing club, boat club, Brittany and boat club, the yacht club that I just added in Rutabaga is not a nonprofit, I would take them off.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Brittingham
not saying,
Boats isn't a nonprofit either.
huh?
That's correct.
Yeah, Brittingham Boats is not a nonprofit.
Is that connected to the university?
No,
No, it's like the city, the city,
Boats
ha-
and boats are together.
city has a contractor, right, that runs all those Marshall Park.
Sorry, I thought it was.
I thought Tyler already has his own business.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
it's just
rents, leases space out
Right.
of the parks to run the business.
Got it, okay.
So,
And see, for the businesses, once you get a master plan and figure out what direction you want to go, whether the parks rents the boat or you bring a vendor in, then that's the time to start talking to.
Right, I would agree.
and also when you talk to the city what do you call them, offices, you're also going to be able to get information about that because they're leasing the land for the city. I think.
Yeah.
So I think you guys have 6. You've got school groups, you've got nonprofit organizations, minority groups, Friends of San Damiano, which is their own group, Ho-Chunk Nation. And if you add it, Monona Residents, which I think the Monona Residents one, that's where you guys started. And
I
I'm
think
not,
that's, I don't know, I think we need to do it some other way. I mean, how
You could
are you
do,
gonna pick the
do
10
with the
residents to do a
Alder
focus group? I don't know,
Alders
out of
represent-
8,000 people, I just don't see it.
well, who was it that asked for that? Was that the mayor?
She said if we were adding, if we were
Adding other
adding
associations.
neighborhood associations,
That's when
personally,
I,
my recommendation is you can just leave them off. They can take the survey, they can attend the public input meetings. If we want to model what the focus group questions from MSA are like and collectively as a committee or individually have these other smaller focus groups and document them and present them.
Because
You know,
he can
I think
text
that's
you in the
fine.
middle of the night too, so they can get their information
There you go.
Correct.
to you.
There you go, just put
I do
your
think
phone out there.
having more engaged, what we have been doing already with these tours in the beer gardens and kind of taking that in, but in a more formalized process. For Monona residents outside of this kind of one-shot
Yeah.
digital survey and showing up to a public meeting. And then from there, it seems like we're kind of into concepting. I think would be great. And how we ever want to, like, I agree, Nancy, trying to pick 10. I think we can invite people and say, if you want to be part of a Monona focus group, we can see what the response comes in and then break it out. So it's not MSA necessarily having to lead it as part of the contract that either a few of us on the committee can help.
And the better thing about that too is that we did have neighborhood groups in Violet and they started fighting each other. So, you know, we want a new structure. We want it over here. No, we want it over there. And so that takes all
I
that.
definitely
out.
see, that's true, I mean, I do think that that's. So with the 6 groups we have are friends, well, nonprofits, education minority,
School groups.
school groups.
So
are we-
Ho-Chunk Nation. So you've got 5 now.
5 and then the cities is actually another group, but
I thought,
it's the 6th group.
So we're jumping, so in terms of the nonprofits, what about all these government civic? DNR, MESPA, capital area, regional planning, greater Madison planning, I mean, are we putting those in the nonprofit category?
I
or
would
are we
put those
putting-
in the services, so metro, fire, police.
So the service, so it would be, that would be part of the city services, but it would also be more than city services later. You're talking about like fire, police, all that, they would be part of that.
You know, we talked with
So one
the
group is
DNR
city,
and
one group is
the
state.
Corps of Engineers because of the lagoons. And so if you want to do anything in the lake, we should be talking to DNR and Corps of Engineers.
So you got state and federal. And so Dan, now you're at 7, but the city and the state and federal are like more of pointed and less of focus groups.
Yeah, and with
Those are like
the,
required
Mhm.
interfaces depending on what we're doing.
That's not really a
Right.
focus
So-
group.
no, and the
stakeholders.
DNR and the Corps, there was 2 people and it's probably the same 2 gentlemen. And we just called them and had a phone call with them.
So,
That's what we.
so you're
would be
doing
better to do
that,
it way.
you have 5 focus groups. Do you need any other focus group? That's the question. Or do any of these need? So I'll throw out that, for instance, minority groups, you have a very long list, and I seriously doubt that it's gonna work to meet with all of them together. Like, you're gonna wind up having to go and talk to some of them either individually or, because you're gonna need feedback from all of them, whether or not they can come and.
It was
join.
hard, so we went to bingo night with the Hmong community. And we went to the Boys and Girls Club and had a session because it's harder for folks to come
Yeah.
meet in the evening. Because there's a lot of families and kids and they just don't have time.
So we tend to go, like, especially groups who tend to be marginalized in these processes, we try to find out what works best for them.
Sure.
And then it generally isn't all come to the one meeting that we have planned for a focus group.
Yeah.
And we wind up getting feedback from them a little bit more directly.
But we put them in a group because then we put all that data.
Right. But I'm thinking if you have 5 groups and you wind up having to do a little bit more pointed work with the nonprofit and or minority groups, that you're gonna be, you guys will get your money's worth.
Is there a decision tonight on like what the 5 groups are, not all of the members of the groups? Or are we making a decision on all of them?
Well, I think because it is a list. I think if you take it home and get back to us in a week, because we might be missing people that will come to you tonight when you get home. And I hate to leave them off the list.
Well, I can add one to your minority group. You don't have VFO on there. You have the La Tienda grocery store, so I figured we should have the Fusion Market as well.
Well, and La Tienda probably should be La Rositas, because that's in Monona, right? Where's
Yeah,
La-
La Rositas used to be La Tienda, now it's La Rositas.
It's, yeah, whatever
They
else
changed
it
it, yeah.
is. They're all together. It's all one.
Yeah.
What was the
But
what was
that
the name
is-
of the agent?
I think it's VFO.
That's,
It's across.
I think it was meant to be an avenue to engage the Hispanic
The community,
population
right,
and
yeah.
community,
Right,
and
right,
whether
right.
it's having flyers posted in Spanish at the grocery store, or connections with that, not necessarily the business itself, but just
Right, I figured that, but there,
But the
if we have an
VFS,
Asian market,
but-
then
sure.
so I have one other question that's maybe more of a, and excuse me for going a little geek here on this consulting front, but I differentiate between a listening session and a focus group.
Mhm.
Right? A focus group, you go in with a set of ideas and your theories, and you're getting very specific feedback about what's being presented and your theory, right? And so the line of questioning is all about, whether that theory or that set of ideas works and whether it doesn't. Or if it doesn't, whereas a listening session is more of an open-ended, what would you like to see? So a listening, in a sense, and I'm making that differentiation just because when I'm doing a listening session, I'm less concerned about it being 10 people.
Mhm.
Because it's more of an open-ended conversation of sort of a discussion of ideas and thoughts and hopes and dreams for whatever, as opposed to, and questioning around that, as opposed to here's 3 charrettes, you know, what do you like about A, B, and C? So I guess I'm wondering what,
Well, so for the minority groups, we try to have people give us their thoughts. I guess you would call it listening session. And we had different exercises where we took drawings and people gave them pins. But it's very hard because the city of Madison asks the same questions over and over on every project that they do. And the minority communities are tired of it.
Yeah.
And when you go and you say, what would you like in the park? They're like, I've already done this 20 times.
right,
And so it was very difficult. The Boys and Girls Club was the only place that we had some feedback on drawings. And that was because it was middle school age kids and elementary age kids. That was just a couple. And it was Marcus, who works for Urban Assets, nieces and nephews are in the Boys and Girls Club. So he brought all his nieces and nephews, and then they brought some friends. And so it was it's very hard to engage because the communities are being engaged on every little thing that happens. Monona Drive,
Yeah.
you know, and this, and this. They're getting asked the same questions over and over.
Mhm.
And that's the hard group. Now the other groups, it's more. I guess the reason we call it focus group because it's a group and it's, you know, they're focused in their intent, but we're really listening. The activity is listening.
But you're
Well, you've got
doing
different
3
questions.
meetings with each, right?
Yeah, you have a different,
So you
your
s-
different approach to the general approach that you're doing with everyone.
We tend to start off with listening, and then we tend to begin to
More
be more
focused.
like this, the second go round is like testing, and then the third
Okay.
go round.
Because
is
we
confirming.
have something that they can react to
Yeah.
in the second stage.
Yeah,
Well,
and
I
I
think the
forgot that it's a
first-
3-round thing, but
Mhm.
so, yeah.
In the first round, I would think you're listening on from different perspectives.
Mhm.
So the Ho Chunk discussion is gonna be very different than
Yeah.
friends discussion and, you know, you got education focus, so I think. And then it's sort of like how we addressed your round
Yeah.
2, right, would be like,
And it really is more what you're thinking, Nancy, on the listening side, because that's where we can't go to that minority groups and ask to prescribe questions that have been asked too much. We just have to go and say that here's this site. It's a clean slate. It's a public place. What serves you the most as a public place on the lake? And get the discussion going in that way. But the other part that's hard, and I don't know, does City of Madison works with a group that has, that provides interpreters? Does Monona work with the same group?
Who?
Interpreters.
Like live in person.
Mhm, because of-
Of that
Live,
reason.
yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of the people don't speak English, so we have to have interpreters. And then also with the flyers, we would give them information on the flyers and then they would, because, you know, you can't just translate it into the computer because it's not right. It's not, it doesn't come out right, so.
Right.
Meeting will end.
You don't, unless it's a court case or something like that.
So I could look into the people in Madison, that group that does it because they're.
Well, we contract with somebody. So I don't know if it's the same company.
That's what I'm wondering. So we'll look and see if it is.
Yeah.
But we'll definitely have to engage them for any flyers and that kind of stuff. That goes. But, you know, when we have meetings with the Hmong or the Latin, or however I'm gonna phrase this right, we'll have to have interpreters because
Spanish speaking.
not all speak English.
If you guys have never heard of it, I'm a huge fan of an organization called Global Detroit. Check them out. Just like Global Detroit. Just, we do a lot of work in Detroit and they are really awesome. because they have people who they work with on a regular basis who are part of the various communities. And so, some communities are not going to be comfortable meeting in a public place. And so you will be invited to a home to talk to the Muslim women about the park. And, just like this huge variety of abilities to understand what the right environment is and to have people who are familiar so that there's a comfort level. I think every community should have an organization like that. I've never started a nonprofit organization, but if I did, it would be that.
But the reason for these focus groups, though, is you have an individual that represents these groups, the minority groups. So that one individual is our springboard for how we can communicate with the community as a whole. So we're listing all these groups, or all these things underneath minority groups, but really what we're after is one person to represent that group.
I have to say
So
that
I was gonna say, as far as next steps, I mean, so we have the 5 groups. Are you gonna resend out the list of the 5 groups, and then we have a week to respond with organizations that we recommend under each?
Yeah, and we can, and that gives us, I think, the way that we can use it then, it gives us a list of organizations or people or businesses that we can contact to find that individual that can be the representative in that group.
Okay.
Because ultimately, this list should then be names, should be people.
Okay. Anything else we have to discuss on the focus groups? All right.
I just have to say that if we're talking about, a focus group labeled as a minority focus group just doesn't, it's just rubbing me the wrong way. Rubbing me the wrong way. It kind of goes back down to what you were saying about they've been asked the same thing by Madison at the same time. I kind of feel like, oh, we're like throwing anybody of color under one in one group together. It just feels really, it doesn't feel right to me. This hasn't.
Underserved or something like that, is that what you want?
Huh?
I mean, the title doesn't sit well with you, or the whole idea?
The whole idea of we need to talk to minorities, so we're gonna get every person of color and every minority in the area together in one room. It just feels really. I don't know, it just feels.
Well,
uncomfortable.
doesn't sound like you would get them together in one room.
But
So what we have done
yeah,
before is organize the focus groups around topics that might be related to things that either are desired or things that are concerns about, which is a different approach, but access for certain types of activities or types of use would be a different kind of way to do that. And then that brings together people maybe with a variety of different viewpoints that can be helpful later.
yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. It's just, to me, it just feels a little bit like
It's different because, we're talking about groups that people do things, and then we're talking about
that's right.
people.
People because of the colors.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right, but if we don't do some kind of outreach, we probably won't get input from a very diverse.
I know, and so I'm certainly aware of that, but I'm just trying to figure out if there's a more effective, honest, whatever way to do it. Beyond saying, oh, your skin is a different color, so you're gonna go to that group.
And again, with Violet's was, these other groups, we met in a room like this with these other groups. But the underserved community members, we went to them in each one of their, like I said, we went to the bingo night at the Hmong community in the Triangle. We went to the Boys and Girls Club. It's a different outreach.
So how is that
We do
organized? Is it organized and listed this way or in a different way for that project?
That we listed them under like a group because we had to document what we were hearing. So it was listed as community members, underserved community members, I think, or something like that. So in the master plan report, there was a section that we could put the documentation in that we received.
That's a good way of wording that.
I'm not understanding, what is the question that's going on here? Like, are we questioning
the-
calling it a focus group?
Yeah,
Or
whether the.
we've already called it a focus group in the minutes
Mhm,
from previous meetings and in your contract, most likely.
mhm.
So I don't think that we can change the
No,
name
we're
of it.
past, no, we're not, we're talking about lumping all the minorities together in a focus group. We're past whether it's a focus group or listening session. I'm saying it makes me uncomfortable.
I don't think he's calling it, well,
I'll just go with Madison.
maybe just call it, I see, you're saying call it some minority group, something different?
No,
It's not a matter of calling the group differently. It's also a matter of pulling together the group based on the color of their skin. Everybody else is in a group because of an activity or a focus as a nonprofit. Or the history, and then with this group, it's, let's pick everybody, every color we
Well, I
can.
think the
and get
intent
them
is
in.
I don't think that that's the
underserved
intent, is to
communities,
like,
right?
call them out like that. I think the intent is to reach out to these people.
I understand the intent, I'm just expressing my concern that we're really careful about it, which I appreciate that you guys
Could
are,
you call
because
it
it feels a little
diverse
awkward to me, I'm
community
just being honest about that.
perspectives?
I would trust whatever you guys have done in the
Right.
past and
And
trust you guys to
That's why I
follow.
asked
it.
I agree with that.
bylaws.
I
I
don't
agree
think we
too.
need
I
to
agree
keep going
too.
on and on with this.
It's
I
a
agree
group, but
too.
the way that we meet with that group is gonna be different than the way we meet with the other groups.
Yep, I
Because we're gonna
agree.
meet
I agree.
individually with.
I
Community
agree, I just wanted it to be, I needed to be sensitive to that, and I wanted to express that I was a little concerned with what was articulated.
Yeah, I think that you've expressed your concern and I think we can move on.
Well, when we, in the report, we'll talk about that too, how
Yeah.
we reached out and met with members and that sort of thing. So yeah, back to Andy's question. So if you could take a look at the list and if there's anything that needs to change. then
I would
let us-
say that there was a lot of additions and changes. If there could be a new list with the
Yeah.
5 categories resent out so that we know what
Yeah.
we're working with. That would be
So
great.
so to Jake, and Jake would probably
Okay.
Yeah,
In the moment.
contact person for it.
Mhm.
there was just a lot of suggested changes already.
Yeah.
And then we have a week to do that.
Yep.
All right. All right, story map.
All right, so, did you get the email? It didn't work? We started this.
After time, after time.
We started
My
the story
computer
map.
died.
Yeah.
We started the story map. We've got some pictures uploaded. I've got some analysis sheets that I brought that we can put up on the story map, and then whenever you're ready to let it go to the general public, we can send out the link to it. And then you can post it on the Friend site, Jake can post it on the city site. We started the tree inventory. We're about a third of the way through the trees. It shouldn't take them a day to get the other 2/3. They only work hard day last year before the beer garden, and they had to leave. We're gonna fly the site. He was gonna fly it Thursday and he didn't know that the beer garden was going on, so he abandoned ship and he's gonna fly in the next couple of days. So we'll have some aerial photos Of the site. Yeah, he's waiting for nice weather, so he'll do it when it's nice.
Sorry. I did not know.
And so we'll have some images that we can put on the story map.
Sorry.
And then the other thing is once the survey is up and live, we can put a link in the story map to the survey too. But again, the thing about the story map is it's live, it's 24 hours a day, and anybody go in there and look at it and keep up to date with the project. So depending upon what information you want to share, we can share it at the appropriate time that you want us to share it. And we can keep adding to that dialogue into the story map. So we're starting with the things that we know, existing pictures. Hannah, who's working on the project, is a student, and she worked on the park in her junior class last year. So she put the timeline that the students use in their inventory. It's real graphic, and we thought it was a nice addition to have onto the thing. So once it's up and going, you can take a look at it. We'll share it with the group first before it goes public so that you can give us some feedback. And then we'll put these analysis drawings on there, and we'll get it going, get it started. And then once we get survey results back in September, October, we can put the results on the story map and any other information you can get out there. It's a good news portal project. People like going on it. It's very user-friendly and interactive. We'll go back to it. We do some fun things too with slider bars. So you have existing versus
yeah.
proposed,
Yeah.
you slide back and forth.
Any questions on the story map? All right, site analysis, you mentioned the trees.
Yeah, so we've started the trees. The analysis that we've done are complete with are the soil slopes, wind and hydrology. And what we do with the wind, we take quarterly wind. We don't do every month. So we do the wind rows over spring, summer, winter, and fall. And it helps us, especially when you start talking about docks and water. It helps you with planning how that's built. Also with in the winter time, if there are outdoor patio areas and things like that, it helps you determine that you might need windbreaks and things like that, or orientation of buildings and outdoor spaces. So it's the wind rows is from Dane County Airport, and it's based on the wind speed and the percent of time during that 3-month period that those winds are at that strength. So it's a pretty interesting diagrams, but very helpful for planning. And then I have the DNR's map for Lake Monona. It's not an exact bathymetric, but it's good for what we're doing. And there's only 3 contours near the site, 3 feet deep, 5 feet deep, and then way out's 10 feet deep. So, it's pretty accurate, and we know that Holy Bay is pretty shallow. But it will help us with any pier structure that you want to put in the lake too, because the closer you get to the house or to the southern boundary, it drops off a little faster.
I have a question regarding your soils. Is this just like, how far down does this go? Your soil analysis, like talks about loam, so I'm just curious. That's not really buildable.
It says on there, so the 2 brown ones are we're actually.
No, I'm just asking how far deep down?
We can add that.
Yeah,
It's in
usually
the
it's
thing.
in the soils.
Yeah, it's all the information's on Dane County GIS, so we can go back in and keep downloading more data.
Oh,
more data.
gotcha.
But the interesting thing was the house is built on soils that's really not good for basements. But then closer to the street, it's okay for basements.
Has anything more been done about the archaeology kind of thing?
We have not received an update from our consultants. Their final report.
Did you ask that?
No. Jake, you haven't received anything from him.
So, for our research, if we start at ground zero, we'll probably be doing a lot of the same stuff that person did. And we won't be able to get further. So if we could start, even if we had a list of the sources that person looked at, it's gonna be much more valuable to you. So we have a pretty small research budget.
Yeah, that's an important piece.
There's, I mean, I will go and I will start, I know with the exact same sources that person started with, and then I'll use up my budget. And if that person found nothing, I will find nothing, and we don't get to like take the next step beyond.
Alexis is coming next week. Andy and Jake are gonna meet with her in the afternoon at the house, but if she can get in the house in the morning, Jake, if somebody can. So she'll do a lot of her own work and on her own time, looking at things. And so she'll wanna kind of be on her own. And then there'll be an opportunity in the afternoon that when Jake and Andy are there, that they can ask her questions and get some feedback from her on what they may have, and she'll have some questions for you. I'm pretty excited about seeing that too. And but when she goes in, she's not gonna be disappointed. She's used to it.
Yeah, I bet.
She'll be like, this isn't so bad.
Yeah, all these ideas will come to her head. They can do this with it.
Anything else for the good of the order?
I think that's all we had on our agenda tonight. And then next month, go back and look at the minutes. Our plans were for next month.
Next month, we'll be planning for the public input.
Yeah. And we'll start to get some data back on the survey by then, so we can use that to help us with the public engagement.
Awesome. So report of activities at San Damiano, we see them listed here, the Ho-Chunk Nation corn harvest event that Nancy had mentioned that we're not quite sure of the date yet. Frank Alice house tours will be happening on September 10th and 17th. And then the Saturday, September 24th, beer garden.
Saturday.
Do we know what time that is?
Yeah.
4 to 6, 4 to 7. Yep, happy hour.
Don't need half price.
Before or after the Badger football game at Ohio State, still time is TBD.
Be good for.
How many people do you think were there last Thursday?
A lot.
Were there more last Thursday than the first one?
It was very similar. An away game.
All right.
Just away. Badger.
But,
I think that day.
oh, sorry.
That'll be the last opportunity for public house tours as far as the planning process for the fall and the winter. We'll open up after that, we'll have the 10th, 17th of September and the 24th.
And we got, we only have exterior pictures on the story map right now, but we can definitely add house pictures. So people are interested and they don't have a chance to go in the house. At least they can see it.
We have a fly-through video.
There's a Matterport, isn't there? a
Yeah.
Matterport?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
There's a second. All those in favor say aye.
Okay.
All those opposed, nay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Get some rest.
Thanks.
Jake, you should have a game out there. Jake.
Lotron.